Good morning, everyone, and congratulations again to the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute for facilitating, from what I have seen up to now, another wonderful and successful conference. This morning, I have been assigned to speak on the very uplifting topic, factors that lead to the collapse of family businesses. And I suspect you're not talking about earthquakes here. I have captioned my presentation this morning, Family Businesses, Perils, and Pitfalls. It is unfortunate that, in Trinidad and Tobago, the small society and economy that we are, we cannot and we do not talk about case studies that are so enriching because of matters of confidentiality, particularly given the relationship between consultant and business, and particularly family businesses. But I must issue a warning that any similarity to real family businesses, living or dead, that I might speak about this morning is purely coincidental. So we shall not reveal too much unless it has been in the public domain. According to the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce, 85% of all locally registered companies are family-owned businesses. In fact, family-owned businesses account for 30% of GDP and employs around 20 to 30% of the national labor force. There are some 20,000 to 30,000 small and medium enterprises, mostly family businesses in Trinidad. Furthermore, it is estimated that 80% of the world's businesses are family-owned and 90% of the businesses within the United States are family-owned. Family-owned businesses are the lifeblood of most economies in the world. This slide shows top family businesses internationally and locally. If you look at the left, you would consider that 35% or so of all Fortune 500 companies are family-owned businesses, including Ford, Walmart, and IKEA. The same is observed in Trinidad, where some of the largest local companies are family-owned businesses. The Ansa Group, Bermudez, Associated Brands, the Guardian Holdings Group, Venco, etc. As a matter of fact, if you strip away the layer of the biggest oil and gas companies, banking and insurance companies, and state enterprises and utilities, you will be left with family-owned businesses representing the top 400 or so businesses in Trinidad and Tobago. As I said before, family-owned businesses are the lifeblood of the Trinidad and Tobago economy and will continue to be so in the future. Andrew Carnegie is credited with the infamous euphemism for family businesses: shared sleeves to shared sleeves in 3 generations, referring to the commonly held belief that in the cycle of family businesses, the 3rd generation is where it all goes awry. It is said that the 1st generation starts a business, the 2nd generation runs it, and the 3rd generation ruins it. Statistics point to the theory's validity. According to the Conway Center for Family Business, 70% of family businesses fail or are sold before the 2nd generation. Only 10% are viable to the 3rd generation, and only 3% make it to the 4th generation. If you look at the international listing on the left-hand side, you would notice some brands and some names that you would have been or still are familiar with that have long gone away from the original startup families that initiated the business. Cadbury, Kropp, Bancroft, the owners of Wall Street Journal. Barings, one of the oldest investment banks in the United Kingdom that went out of business in the 1990s. Seagram, the distillers, Canadian distillers of liquors, changed hands from the original owners. Eaton's, Canadian retail stores from the early 1800s way down to the 1990s. Steinberg, Gucci, the famous fashion line. Transworld Airlines, that was started by the Howard Hughes family. Kingfisher Airlines out of India, that was started by Malia family. Madoff, the infamous Rupert Madoff. Stanford, Alan Stanford, the still infamous Alan Stanford. Enron, the doyen and darling of the business community and of the business journals up to a few years ago. Vanderbilt and Woolworths. If you look at the right, you would notice, if you're old enough, if you're old like me, again, some family businesses that did not make it, that no longer exist. Kapilani's stores, retail and wholesale outlets, and ventures into finance and other types of businesses died when Mr. Ram Kapilani died one fateful morning along the highways in Trinidad. Akbar Ali's, if you grew up in Sawa, as I did, you would have known that the Akbar Ali family had most of the businesses that dominated the Kwesi in Sawa, the general store, the bookstore, the fashion store, the groceries. As a matter of fact, as a young consultant, when I started to work with PwC, Pricewaterhouse in those days, many years ago, one of the first assignments I had was to go and work with the group from Pricewaterhouse to try and salvage the Akbar Ali's family fortune. Amar, Bolan Amar was the founder of Amar Motors, the maker in those days, the assembler of Toyota motor cars, and the sole distributor for Toyota up to a few years ago, handed it to the second generation, and you know what has happened there. H.E. Robinson, again, H.E. Robinson was the distributor of motor vehicles up to 20, 30 years ago. Lelam of Best Creek fame. Everybody knows about the CL Financial Saga. The Dupre family, Wholesome, used to be popular bakery in Trinidad in my days. J.B. Fernandez sold out to Angostura in 1973. And those of you who are following the news would have noticed a few weeks ago that the J.B. Fernandez family is fighting in court for what is left of the great J.B. Fernandez fortune. Quellos has since been sold to KISS. Century Eslon has since been sold to EIL. Max and House, who always needed the money, is no longer in existence. Jack Ramuta Singh, the Steel King, has been acquired by his sister's business, Bhagwan Singh, Helen Bhagwan Singh. Spectacular Forum, it is venture into entertainment. And Willie's Ice Cream, up to a few years ago, making quite a name in the ice cream business, no longer in existence. There are several common threads connecting why family businesses fail. Unfortunately, families also carry grudges and bad blood, some going back to childhood. In the business press over the years, there are very famous family feuds, which are well documented. And I would highlight a few because it is important that we start to see the threads that could start or be the catalyst for further difficulties that family businesses confront. Many of these feuds started with founders, owners, and first generation. Some of them would have gone to the third generation, some of them intergenerationally to the fifth generation. But the press reports and has reported on all of these in very vivid and, if you like, interesting reading, very interesting, not only business reading, but almost dramatic reading. Adolf and Rudolf Dashler, Germans who started a business in their mother's laundry, could have been the top footwear company in the world had they not fallen out many years ago. And the infighting resulted in splitting in half Adidas and Puma, which are by far the second and third spot sport shoe businesses. Because of the infighting, they made room for Nike to be by far the leader in sport shoe businesses. Mukesh and Anil Ambani, their father was the founder of Reliance Industries. He died without leaving a will. His sons Mukesh and Anil continue to fight up to this day for the control of many parts of the business, and their children, the third generation, are trying to mend very, very, very potent family fights and quarrels, with even the wives involved and so on. It's very bitter and a big story in the Indian business sphere. Gucci, all of you would know Gucci, the famous fashion line. Gaucho Gucci in the 1900s left the business to his oldest son, Aldo, who internationalized the business and led it to become a premier fashion house. Problems arose soon after the third generation took control. Aldo's son, Paulo, and his nephew, Maurizio, who shared control, had two different aspirations. And we'll see later when we talked about shared values and shared aspirations, how important it is for the viability and continuance of family-held businesses. Seagram's was owned by the Bronfman family. At one time, they were the largest owner of alcoholic beverages in the world. It was founded by Samuel Bronfman. The company thrived under Edgar Bronfman, Samuel's son. Trouble began when Edgar's son, Edgar Bronfman Jr., again the third generation, took over and ventured into the film and entertainment industry, gambling the family's fortune. The Vanderbilts. Cornelius Vanderbilt in the 1800s built a fabulous building in shipping and railroads. By today's standard, he would have been worth $240 billion, making him one of the richest, or the family, one of the richest families in the world. However, his descendants lived extravagantly, and by the 1970s, not one of them were millionaires. Too much dispersion of wealth and control over many children and not enough control of power. And when we talk about reasons for failures, you would see control of fighting for power and control over care leads to the demise of family businesses. A culture of nepotism promoted mediocrity, whereby unqualified Vanderbilt relatives were placed in positions of power simply because they were members of the founding family. Lack of family governance structures and succession planning led the business open to power struggles, family discord and transition problems. Anheuser-Busch successfully ran 5 generations. So this is way past the 3rd generation of the Busch family until it was bought in 2008 by InBev in a hostile takeover. The Busch family was mired by conflict, power struggles, and financial mismanagement. So power and control impact family businesses just like any other enterprise. What makes the inevitable power and control struggles even more complex in a family business is the family dynamics that play a significant role in decision-making and succession planning. If family dynamics are not centered on a shared purpose, the result is often organizational friction and low performance. A common mission, high-trust relationships, and effective decision-making can help bolster family business performance, especially in today's uncertain economic and business climate. There are a number of reasons, and I've listed 11 here, that could usually contribute to family business failures. And one could be the catalyst for the others, or for many others to follow. And we talked about bad blood in the family and family feuds. And that usually is a major contributor to a number of these other reasons for failure. Yeah, lack of shared purpose as a result of family feuds, as a result of intergenerational conflict and so on. I'm just going to highlight a few that we have picked up over the years in dealing with family businesses. One of them, of course, is lack of leadership, right? The required leadership at a particular time may be out of context in the current circumstances, where the founder owner, or even the founder owner's 2nd generation or 3rd generation, again, because of nepotism, because the family requires or prefers a family member to be the chief executive officer, to be major decision maker, might be out of sync with the realities and requirements for running the business. A major contributor, of course, is that of the founder. The founder owner is a catalyst for a significant amount of business failures, particularly if there was not a succession planning process in place. Many business owners and founders live beyond retirement age and become increasingly reluctant to face their own mortality and enter into a structured process of handing over reins, leaving the family in a crisis at death. And related to that, of course, is succession planning. And succession planning does not happen when the founder owner dies and his first son takes over. Succession planning requires many years of planning, discussion, development, choosing, and grooming a son, a daughter, a grandson to take over the family business after many years of testing to see if or who might be the right candidate amongst family members or even amongst external candidates. We talked about family conflict at length, sibling rivalry, marital problems, ownership disputes, transgenerational involvement, altruistic inclinations, and succession issues. All of these contribute negatively to family business viability and can include loss of majority ownership in the family business, division and fragmentation of group business, or the decline or destruction of shareholder value, and above all, an irreversible rift between family members and family harmony. And if you want to know about really some juicy family businesses feuds, I think the Canadians in particular, and the most recent one was the Rogers family, Rogers Communications, that led again to the dilution of shareholder wealth and so on. And Ed Rogers may have won in the court, but it may have been a Pyrrhic victory because the Rogers family business is now significantly diluted. You should also read about the Liebfeld versus Liebfeld versus Liebfeld versus Liebfeld family saga, which is very interesting. Again, because of the seriousness of the family conflict, it was assigned to the courts for sale, and the Liebfeld would have lost all of the fortune. I think the most popular or infamous family business saga, again Canadian, is the Regimen family saga, which Regimen, of course, at one stage was the fourth wealthiest family in the world. They control one of the biggest commercial building or commercial ownership companies, Olympia and New York, and most of the iconic buildings in Canada, the World Trade Center in New York, and so on, were developed by the Reichmans, and unfortunately ended up in the courts again, losing a lot of the family fortunes in the process, after being maybe the fourth richest family in the world. So family conflict is a major contributor and a significant catalyst for many of these reasons for family business failure. And of course, poor governance, weak boards, family businesses are stubborn when it comes to appointing proper independent boards. They prefer to have ceremonial boards where friends and former bankers and so on can yield to the parochial interests of the founder owner. Founder owners are stubborn, as we said, and sometimes are reluctant to seek outside help, leading to poor governance and weakening family business structures. Market and macroeconomic changes also a significant contributor to failures in family businesses. And you would be amazed to know that many family businesses successful on first sight do not have formal strategic plans and have poor financial policy and management in place, with a lot of intermingling between family and personal business. We talked about nepotism and unqualified family business members. And of course, sometimes, particularly third generation, gets vision for big projects, which could undo the family business and put the balance sheet at risk. So these are some of the reasons for the failures of family businesses. And I'd say they're always a significant leading catalyst. And a lot of it has to do with business family feuds and conflict. It is important that family business owners and family business boards, whether they're fiduciary boards, ceremonial boards, or family boards, or advisory boards, understand and diagnose the fault lines in the family business and continue to assess what their shared purpose is. You know, we were doing some work for a family business, a significant family business recently. And one of the questions I asked the board was, what is the purpose of the business? And they struggled to give me or to respond with what a shared purpose of the business was. And that, of course, leads to clarity around the decisions that the board and the business might make. Okay, so I would always ask a family business to be very clear on what your purpose is, and particularly in an environment where E, S, and G are becoming paramount. Family businesses, like all other businesses, must have a clear purpose, a reason for being. Fault lines that lead to family business closure could include lack of trust, lack of communication, lack of shared purpose, as we said before, and particularly when it comes to intergenerational sharing. A shared purpose can help family members align their values and interests in support of a common mission and a common goal. Control versus care. Instead of infighting, trying to outdo each other, families, businesses ought to be careful that fighting about succession for power from one generation to the next in particular can be the death knell for your family business. Candid hypocrisy. I remember going into a meeting at the invitation of a family to talk about family businesses, among other things. And I went to the meeting. It was a nice luncheon. And after lunch, we were supposed to talk about business and about how we can organize to make the family structures and the family business stronger. And would you believe that the family members, they avoided any issue around business and any meaningful conversation that was the reason for my invitation were left unaddressed. And these issues, of course, if left unaddressed, could lead to significant distress in families and obstruct performance in the organization. How do you avoid the traps? How to avoid the traps that would lead to the demise of your family business? I think it's important to make it clear from the beginning, and this probably should happen at the owner-founder stage, that the family business is for the family, but avoid promising a place for everyone in the family. There might be enough in the family estate, if you wish to keep the family engaged and employed, for everyone to do, but not everyone can be the chief executive officer who could be directing the business. Okay, so avoid thinking or giving the impression there's always a place for every member of the family in the business. And family members should stop using the business as a fallback position after they have failed in whatever venture they might try, some of which might be totally unrelated to business. So if you're a failed musician, the family business is not a fallback option. And the family leader, the business leader, should never give the impression that there's always a place for every member of the family in business. Despite their lack of experience, often we see offspring ascend to leadership positions and responsibilities for which they are not qualified. A job, as we said, in the family business should not be an entitlement. We talked about succession planning, the identification of family members who would one day run the business, either the second generation, the third generation. Most of the family businesses in Trinidad now are into their second and third generations. We don't have many intergenerational family businesses that span over 5 generations and so on. But we must be very, very careful that when we're choosing potential chief executive officers to run the family businesses, that they're equipped to do so, that they're interested in doing so, and that we spend 2 to 3 to 4 years ensuring that they're well-groomed, they're well-experienced, they're well-educated to become future chief executive officers, directors, and leaders of the family business. It is not an entitlement. And to the extent that family members cannot rise to the occasion, we always encourage business owners, founders, to go outside and to choose through an executive search someone who can fit into the family business, who has the experience and the qualifications, and who could act as a mentor, right, to potential leaders in the family business. But it's not an entitlement because you're the first son or the first daughter that you would automatically be the chief executive officer when the founder owner or the second generation chief executive officer retires. Let's remember that most businesses cannot grow fast enough to employ every family member. Let's take as an example an owner-founder with 3 children, and each of those 3 children have 3 children, that's the second generation. And the third generation, each of those 3 children have 3 children. By the third or the fourth generation, if you promise that there's always a room for everyone here, you will have between 25 and 35 family members to employ. That's a lot of family members to employ if every family member wishes to find a space in the family business. We would posit that only committed, qualified relatives should be allowed to run the family business and to develop strategy and grow the business to create opportunities for additional family employment if you so wish. There's another problem in family businesses which we find and which we see all the time: close family members supervising one another, which not only presents candid family feedback and coaching, but could exacerbate the tensions that exist in relationships and intergenerational relationships and so on. We have been proposing for family businesses that reach sufficient size, critical mass, to enact family councils with strict rules of governance and a strict constitution, and that family members who part of the family business should meet informally and sometimes formally, quarterly, over lunch, casually but formally, and discuss family business candidly and openly, guided by the rules of the family constitution as evidenced by the family council. It is always good to have a trusted external advisor in those meetings who could facilitate the proceedings of the meeting and who could act as a conduit and as a cushion in the event of conflict. I have attended similar meetings and it works. And although you might not want to enact a formal family council because you have not reached the size for that, the monthly family lunch is a wonderful place, not only to enjoy each other as family, but also to talk about business and plannings. Another important matter that a lot of owners, founders are reluctant to deal with is estate planning, and particularly leaving a will. You would have seen that a lot of the reasons why that led to family feuds is because the owner founder, in the Brofman case, in the Reichman case, right, in the Ambani case, the owner founder did not leave a will. So all of the sons in particular thought that they should run the business, and of course that causes a lot of family conflict. You know, we like to go back to Darwinian principles here and remind family businesses it's not the strongest or the most intelligent or the family member that has the brilliant ideas that will guarantee the survival of the business, but is the business, the board, the CEO who is responsive to transformation and change. At the end of the day, family discord, power struggles, spendthrift grandchildren, and poorly qualified managers and executives can all doom a family business. Ultimately, success requires many factors to align, as well as a healthy dose of luck. to prevent Carnegie's prediction, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations from coming through. Successful family business planning requires years of planning, careful management, and the cultivation of a family culture that prioritizes stewardship and a family legacy of success. During the past 2+ years of COVID-19 pandemic, the plight and importance of family businesses were brought to the fore. Governments all over the world responded in varying measure to ensure the survival of SMEs and family businesses. Many family businesses did not make it, but in the spirit of Schumpeter's creative destruction, novel and innovative ideas and new and revived businesses have emerged. And we're seeing the emergence of very innovative startups from young people. YP is one of them. You've seen Ramps Logistics, you know, with all the trouble you're giving them in Guyana, taking bold steps to expand the business into international business, thus ensuring the continuance and the viability of the family business. The family business is truly the foundation of entrepreneurship and will remain forever the lifeblood of the economy of Trinidad and Tobago and the world. Thank you very much for the opportunity to make this presentation.
Thank you very much, Hollick. That was indeed an extremely engaging presentation. I was taking notes so much that it was difficult to find time to pause, because I felt every single point you made was so powerful. But you know, to put it in the context as we are hearing, some of these family businesses can in fact have been the world leaders had it not been for simple issues involved around conflict with family members. So this has to be something that we all pay attention to, because it, as you say, sometimes starts at the founder level. So it has to be guarded against at every level. It could be at the founder's level, 2nd generation, 3rd generation. Or I saw you even share, there was an example where it was way past the 3rd generation that the family conflict started. So indeed, some very important lessons for us. I want to invite persons, if you have questions or comments, you know, feel free to raise your hand, or, you know, to indicate that you want to ask a question, and I'm going to be able to address it. And we do have two comments in the chat, you know, commending you, Hollick. We have Ann Crick from Jamaica saying it was a great presentation that touched on some critical points. And then Saskia Carmichael Sam saying, excellent presentation. So I see Anne has her hand up. So Anne, I am going to invite you to unmute. And if you want to put your video on as well, that would be great, because we could then add you to the panel forum as well to be part of the conversation.
Sure. Okay, thank you very much. I love your presentation. I think it made some really important points. 2 points I wanted to make. One, I am on the board of a family-owned business, and as I was reflecting on what you said, I was thinking that what really helped GMMB quite a bit is that there was a very strong vision passed on by the founder, who unfortunately passed very young in the life of the business. But I think that that is what has helped the business to really succeed through to the 2nd generation. So I think vision and purpose is very important. And that leads to my 2nd point, which is some research that a colleague of mine is doing on family-owned businesses. And what he determined was that a lot of families, he's done it regionally, have really just focused on the business as a way of doing something short term, like getting the children through university or whatever. So that's not much of a vision. So you can understand that by the time it gets to the second and third generation, it's kind of filtered down. It's not that important. So again, the importance of vision. But thanks again for a great presentation.
Thank you for that. And I must tell you that we work with the JMMB group, and it's a pleasure, and we are honored to work with the group. And you are right. One of the things that we pick up even before every meeting starts is the sense of shared purpose. And I would tell you that we start with a prayer. And nothing could be better than invoking divine authority to guide proceedings and to make sure you stay with that shared purpose. So that's something you can share with a lot of your family businesses throughout the region. It's a pleasure to work with the JMMB group. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for that contribution to Anne. I want to invite Liz. I see Liz has her hand up. And just to share that Liz was in fact our opening presenter last year for Governance Week for family-owned businesses. So we are very happy to have her participate now as well.
Right. Thank you, Kim. And good morning, everyone. Hollick, great presentation.
Thank you.
I mean, I like the person who just spoke. You know, I'm the chairman of a large insurance company, which is family owned. They own lots of companies, and the insurance company is one of them. And I guess just fortunate, right place, right time. First, non-family member who is chairing one of the company's, business. But you did mention that the third generation fails, but every family comes with a set of values and a set of also traditions. And I think sometimes there are some family members who want to stick with this tradition. Would you say perhaps that's the reason why the third generation falls off, the business falls off, and it's ruining in the third generation because the older generation or the first generation wants to stick to tradition, and the dynamics have changed and perhaps they're resistant to change? And do you think, Hollick, this might be contributing to perhaps why the third generation is ruining the business?
There's also a demographic reason. You know, the owner, founder works his shirt sleeves off to create a family business. And you're right, the initial intention might have been to see the family through, to see the children through university and so on. And, you know, the excitement might build up and, you know, the vision might be expanded. The second generation, which is the children of the founder owner, would come home in the evening from school and help daddy or mommy in the business and spend their holidays and the weekends working in the business. And guess what? The third generation, that's the second generation's kids, are the recipients of all that has been accumulated in terms of wealth and prosperity. And they are the ones with the fancy cars and go to the fancy universities and so on, and maybe become distracted. Now, it is always very important that the second generation, as we said before, and this could only happen through communication, right? And conscious conversation about who in the third generation might be interested and is best suited to be the future leaders of the family business, right? And you have to make that very, very clear. I mean, if the family business, as we say, has many tentacles and many arms, you know, there's always room for most family members. There's never room for all family members. If somebody wants to go and be a jazz musician, that's fine, right? And he could get his dividends and so on and so on. But don't put the jazz musician to run the business, please, right? And if the third generation is not interested in the business, he might be the favorite grandson. Please keep him away from the business, right? He has no interest in the business. He's not so inclined. And we see that. I see that, and you talk about traditional businesses. And there are a lot of cultural idiosyncrasies here. And we see that in businesses in Guyana, and particularly in Trinidad, where there's a favorite grandson who might not have either the cognitive skills, the business skills, the interest, the inclination, or might not share the family values. That's very important. So this shared purpose and this shared value, right? And this perpetuating the family values is very important. However, we have to be careful sometimes about mission and values, particularly starting from what the founder owner's mission and values might be, because they could change over time, right? Not so much in principle, but in terms of manifestation. So the third generation might have a different concept of what his grandfather or his grandmother might have thought about in terms of values. We have to be careful how we groom and select, particularly third generation. And we talked about the spendthrift third generation. Those are the lucky ones, right?
Okay.
Those are my kids. Sorry, right? Those are my kids. But you have to be careful that you don't spoil them to the extent that they would have lost what the soul of the family values are, the conscience of the family. Yeah.
We have another question. So Liz, if you have another question, you can stay there, you'd let me know. But we have a very nice question from Faika Kamuden. And Faika, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. She asks, in the context of our culture in the Caribbean, what guidance do you have for an independent director or advisor who is subject to attempts from some family members to influence them?
Happens all the time. So independent means, independent from being coerced or to take a position that is not rational and that is dependent. The reason you might, and it always happens, right? You will have family members or a family member who's in conflict with the family member who might be the CEO or might be on the board, trying to influence an independent director. An independent director, by definition, should not be easily influenced. Yeah? And how do you deal with that at the board level? Yeah? Without sometimes, divulging the confidence of the family member who might have shared something in confidence. You have to deal with it as a possible threat without revelation, without breaking confidence. You have to also counsel, right, the errant family member who might be trying to cause conflict and try to bring that family member on the side of reason. That's the role of an independent advisor or an independent director in family businesses. You're not supposed to get into the cut and thrust of the emotion and not supposed to carry news to the rest of the board family members. Oops. Yeah, very difficult and very emotional. It happens, and I have experienced that myself. Yeah, even as a consultant, I've experienced where disenfranchised or otherwise family members come to me and try to get me against the CEO or the CEO's wife and son, and you have to be very careful. Yeah.
All right, we have a question from Malanyad, but before we go to it, I know Simone had her hand up, so I want to invite Simone onto the floor now too, so she can pose a question or comment.
Thank you very much, Kamala. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. It's afternoon.
Morning, Simone.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rajkumar. That presentation hit the nail on the head for me. Question from a personal experience with family business. So I am the fourth generation, and I want your advice on this. Because to me, what you said reflected what I noticed my family's history was. The great-grandparents started the business because of necessity, became successful. They sent their children away to school. The children had very different values, had no interest in the family business. It was a plantation, very profitable. The generation grew up going to the land and helping out, and everybody went their way. And now they want us to fix it.
Mhm.
And my question to them, I told them, and they think the lawyers know everything. And I keep telling them, I said, you're not interested, don't do it, because not everybody can be involved. Not everybody should be involved. But do you think it is possible at this stage to pull it back? After the third generation has already decided, look, we are doing this again. They're all in their 60s and 70s now, and they want us now. They want in their 30s and 40s to start it back out of some sense of sentimentality and great grandma did say. And for me, economically, it doesn't make any sense. But I want to know, have you seen examples where people have been able to pull it back and reinvigorate the business and move forward with the interested parties? Thanks.
I don't know the context, the true and the full context. And you've said that it is not financially, economically viable. So to me, that's a red flag. If you want to do it for sentimental reasons, that's a wrong reason. That's a very wrong reason to try and keep a family business going. If the economics is not in favor of the market, so technology, of continuing the family business that you have such a sentimental attachment to, I would say, don't pursue it, right? Because you'll be throwing money down the drain. I don't understand the context. If you could revive a wonderful sentiment because there are some pockets of opportunity, right? That there's a special cocoa you can plant that you could sell to Switzerland to make Cadbury chocolates, go right ahead. But if you want to pump money into a dying economic proposition, you better go and listen to a sentimental song. That's the better way to deal with sentimentality, right? I don't know. Maybe you should not pursue it if it doesn't make financial or economic sense. Yeah?
Thank you very much. I'm going to quote you on the song. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we have a question from Marlon Yard. So Marlon, I'm just looking to see if you want to unmute and come ask this question yourself. We'd be very happy to have you joining the conversation here. So let's bring in Marlon and it's a very good question, Marlon. So let's hear it.
Well, first, let me thank you, Hollick, for your presentation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And I should also declare an interest. I'm the managing director of the Barbados Stock Exchange. So this is a question that might seem self-interest in it. And my question is, are family-owned businesses inclined to go public and list on stock exchanges as a way to carry on the life of the business and in addition, bring in qualified and professional management? Because with the listing on exchanges, a certain rigor and discipline that comes with that. What's your experience in that area?
That's a very good question, Marlon, and a very relevant question. We have tried to introduce the second level, tier 2 listing for family-owned businesses many years ago. And up to now, I think we have only had 2 takers, that's Cinema One and Endeavor Holdings. And you have to understand, Marlon, in our societies and in Trinidad in particular, that family-owned businesses are largely secret organizations, secret family organizations. One of the reasons that they shy away from having formal boards, right, or sharing the secrets of the family business to too many outsiders or independent directors and so on, is because they don't want too many people know their business. Now, that to me is counterproductive, because what it does, it keeps the majority of our businesses at a certain level, which to me is not sustainable in the long run and does not improve or add to the economic well-being of the national economy or the macroeconomy. That's a very difficult one, and I don't know what other incentives are required in Trinidad and possibly Barbados to incentivize family businesses to list on the stock market. Family businesses prefer to plow back their own profits and their own surpluses and family savings into the business rather than conforming to the rigidities and strictures and exposures of presenting themselves to the public to raise funding for expansion. So it's a double-edged sword, really. And to me, it is a defeatist kind of attitude. These are, I mean, this is a problem that our own stock exchange has had to deal with. And I don't know what is the next strategy to encourage family businesses to list and therefore to expand and hopefully to grow the economy. That's a very, very relevant question.
I have a follow-up to it, which was, sorry, Marlon, but I want to ask this because I've always tried to understand it. We do have some family-owned businesses that list, but they list only a less than controlling share. And does that work? What explain to us how it is that we have, so that way the family continue to have control, but they still list on the stock exchange and so get some of the benefits of raising capital in the market.
You want to take that one?
Hollick, yeah.
Marlon, I think you're miles more qualified to respond to that.
Well, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You're
Okay.
miles more qualified than me to respond to that. Yeah.
No, I always, and Kamala, that's something I tell people all the time. If you control 50.01% of a company, you control the company. And, you know, and that's a good point. People are afraid to let people into their business because they don't want people to know their business, but they're also afraid of the company being taken over by somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
As a consequence, that is a reluctance. But, you know, most companies can list probably about 25, 30, 40% of their company, and the original family owners still control the company. Mm-hmm. Now, the thing is, if the original family owners, the ownership is split up by different members of the family, and one family member decides, say, to give up their share of the company to somebody outside of the company, then you lose control. So that's something you need to be careful of. But to go to your point, Hollick, I mean, I'm actually here writing a paper to submit to a government ministry. What's the title of the paper here? Issue and investor incentive proposals. Mm-hmm. And I say, look, you got to look at it from two sides: the demand, the supply side, which is the issuers, the companies that who have the securities that want to list and want to raise capital, and the demand side, people wanting to invest in these companies. And I'm more looking at SMEs. And I say, look, from the issuer perspective, maybe you can incentivize by now Jamaica did a wonderful job in offering tax incentives for the growth market, for their junior market. But one of the things I'm saying is implementation of a tiered system of tax credits and or allowances on VAT for initial input for goods or services produced for sale for companies listed on the junior market as an incentive to issuers. Another one is implementation of a tax credit for dividend payments that will allow issuers to maintain more net income so that they can continue to invest in the company. And then from an investor side, the demand side, exemptions on tax on dividends for securities listed on the market. And then the other thing is reimposition of a tax allowance for new issues of securities on the market, so that persons would get the tax benefit. Now, when you say these things, obviously this goes to the heart of new generation side of government. So one of the things that we've seen in the Jamaica market is that as a consequence of new companies coming onto the board, they grow, they employ more people, more PYE, more VAT, all the other that accrue to the benefit of these companies, they bring in foreign exchange. So there's ways both the investing public, the issuer, and the government and the economy as a whole, and need to get people to see these things and participate in the market in that way. SMEs, family-owned businesses, are the drivers of economic activity in any economy. And people need to understand that. They employ large numbers of people. These big companies are good, right? But they don't employ half the amount of people that SMEs employ. And I'll stop there before I take over.
And that's very good, Marlon. And Marlon, we think the government gave a plethora of similar benefits to encourage SMEs and family businesses to list. And again, maybe with the coming of the third generation in running family businesses, you would see a different kind of dynamic. But owner, founder, And even second generation are not inclined
Yeah.
just not just yet. Let's see how
Yeah.
it goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Malam. Thank you.
I see Faye has her hand up as well, so I want to invite Faye in because she after has
Thank you very much, Kamala. I know we're kind of running out of time, but there were kind of like two related points I wanted to make. I attended a seminar that the stock exchange put on together, and they had, I think it was the Cinema One people there, if I'm not mistaken, a couple of years ago. And if I had a private company that I was considering taking public, that would have convinced me not to, because the regulation to which it took them over a year, it could take you about 18 months or more to actually put yourself in a position to be able to meet the regulation. So that is, I think, a big deterrent. And the reason this is a deterrent is because the threshold for private companies is very low. Private companies are regulated by the banks. Once upon a time, private companies had to file their accounts. We took that away with the New Companies Act in the late 1990s. So because you have a regime where the regulation and the disclosure requirements between private companies and listed companies is such a wide gap. It's a huge step. There's a lot of protection. And I do question whether some of the larger private companies should not be subject to more regulation, not because of their public nature, but because of the impact they could have on the economy. I mean, CL Financial, they were regulated industry, but it's not inconceivable that you could have large organizations that are not in a regulated industry that could have that impact. So I think we do need to look at some of those things.
Great. And I agree with you. I mean, we're talking about family businesses here. And if we were to talk about tier 2, apart from the 9 or so that are listed in the stock exchange, talking about some family businesses where sales are approximating $1 billion, that's out of the radar. These are big businesses. And you're right. I think we need to have much more stringent regulations with respect to business activity and reporting activity and so on.
If I may jump in to Faye, as it relates to the same question of the hurdle you jump, I always say to whom much is given, much is expected. If you go out there in the public and you raise capital from the public, you need to be accountable in some way. So I take your point that it might seem so, but once you go out in the public, you want to make sure our regulators, there's 3 things that they're concerned about. They want to make sure that they're protecting investors. They want to make sure that the information out there is fair, efficient, and transparent. And most importantly, they want to make sure they reduce systemic risk in the system, in the economy. And so sometimes it might seem difficult, but if you're going up there and taking the public's money, and you cited an example, CL Financial, you need to be accountable to the public, and you need to instill the confidence in the marketplace. And I will leave it there.